What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to the Versus series. This is the series where I take two similar elements from a Call of Duty game, I break them down in great detail and put them side by side to find out which one is best. And in today's episode, we're going to be covering the Kar98k versus the SPR208. And just like with most of this series, a lot of this is going to be a bit more Warzone centered. However, all of these stats also apply to multiplayer, so you can still get some very valuable information here for multiplayer game modes. But let's just kick this episode off and start it off with damage. Now for these, of course, we deal a different amount of damage to the limbs, the lower torso, the upper torso, and the head. And generally speaking, the SPR208 is going to deal a bit more damage than the Kar98k, however, not by a large margin at all, and in regular core game modes, for instance, you literally will never notice a difference here between the damage values. And even in Warzone, when you start factoring armor in, there are almost no situations that you're going to run into where the damage between these two is going to make a difference. They would have to have an armor plate that's hurt just the exact right amount for there to be any sort of difference. So yes, the SPR deals more damage, but no, you'll probably never notice a difference between these two. And it turns out it's a very similar story when we talk about the range values as well. As you can see here, they are almost identical. The Kar98k, based on my testing, has maybe an extra meter or meter and a half of range compared to the SPR208. But the chances that you're going to be falling within that exact 1 meter window, those are very slim. So just like with damage, both of these guns are going to perform pretty much the same with ranges until we start adding barrels. Now I just wanted to compare the longest barrels for the Kar98 and the SPR. And it turns out with the 27.6 inch barrel on the Kar98, you get a 35% boost to your damage range, which is a great boost. Whereas with the 26 inch barrel on the SPR208, you only get a 25% boost. So at that point, there does start to be a bit more of a noticeable difference, but it's not like a game changer by any means. The Kar just gains a slight edge here. But now let's move into rate of fire, and once again, these are very similar in this area if we're looking at the base rate of fire values. So with the Kar98k, you're locked at 54 rounds per minute. No matter what attachments you put on there, still going to be 54 rounds per minute. Whereas with the SPR, our base rate of fire is 59 rounds per minute, which is a little bit faster than the Kar98, but not by a super noticeable degree. However, we can use the featherweight bolt attachment, and what this does is it bumps our fire rate up to 71 rounds per minute, which is quite noticeably faster than the Kar98 at this point. This is a massive boost and definitely something to consider when choosing between these guns because this really does give a much larger edge to the SPR208 over the Kar98. Now in this same section, I also want to look at how many shots it's going to take you to kill to the upper torso, assuming the enemy is using armor in Warzone. So if the enemy has one armor plate equipped, up close, you're still going to be able to kill them in one shot to the upper torso with both of these guns. However, if the enemy has 2 or 3 armor plates, that just adds a shot to kill at all ranges to the upper torso. Again, you can still get a one-shot kill to the head, but this is just assuming the upper torso shots. But the main thing here, I just wanted to point out, both of these perform exactly the same when it comes to the number of shots it takes to kill in Warzone when you have these different number of armor plates. Now, moving on to a few miscellaneous stats here. First up, we have our aim down sight time, which is very, very important with these guns. And you can see here that clearly the Kar98 is a little bit faster in this area, and it is noticeable when we're talking about aim down sight time as well. I should mention though that both of these are still quite fast. They're much faster than the actual sniper rifles in this game, even when you have sniper scopes equipped on these. But after that, we have magazine capacity, which is the same with both of these at 5 rounds. Then our reload time with the Kar98k, keep in mind, I'm assuming that these guns will be scoped because like I said, this is going to be focused primarily around Warzone and most of the time you're going to use some form of a scope on these. And when you do with the Kar98k, you can no longer reload with a stripper clip and therefore you have to load each cartridge individually. So our reload time from empty is 4.2 seconds, which is way slower than our reload time with the SPR, which is a flat 2 seconds, no matter how many rounds you need to reload because it's just a standard magazine. Now, to be fair to the Kar98 here, you can also just reload an individual round. So after every shot you fire, you could just reload one round so you're not stuck for more than 4 seconds reloading the rest of them. So it might not be quite as bad as it looks here, but still at the end of the day, the SPR is generally going to be better in this area. But finally, I just wanted to quickly look at our movement speed, and the Kar98 does gain a very slight edge here. It has a 93% movement speed, whereas the SPR is a 92% movement speed. Next up, just wanted to briefly look at hipfire, and as you can see here, the SPR-208 is definitely better in the hipfire department, and it's actually quite good for hipfire, but the Kar98's not too far behind it. Now moving on, something I wanted to touch on here, because it's very important in Warzone, you're generally going to want to use a sniper scope or variable zoom, but for me at least, I always just go with the standard sniper scope on these, and I wanted to put them side by side and just compare them. And here it is. You can see there's a big difference in how close the scope is to your eye. With the SPR, the scope fills up much more of the screen, and it also gives you a wider view within the scope itself. Whereas the Kar98 is a much smaller scope where your eye is further away from it, so you don't get to see quite as much through that scope. Additionally, as a result of that, it actually kind of changes the contrast, and with the SPR, I think it's a much more clear image while aiming down sight, and it clears up some of the blurriness and haziness. And keep in mind, I didn't color correct these either. These are from the exact same position and everything. This is exactly how these scopes would look side by side. And I would say the SPR has a clear edge there, as well as the default reticle is just better on the SPR. It's not nearly as obstructive. You can see at about 200 meters here, the Kar98's reticle pretty much blocks the entire enemy character model, which can make things tricky for trying to hit a really precise shot. Now, while we're on this topic, let's have a look at bullet drop. And keep in mind, with these setups, I'm actually running them as my ideal Warzone setups, which I'll share with you guys toward the end of the video here. But the main thing is, both of these have the longest barrels equipped. And at 190 meters, there is very little bullet drop with either of these guns. You do have to aim slightly more toward the top of their head if you still want that bullet to land on the head and not the upper torso. But yeah, all the way up to about 200 meters at least, you don't need much adjustment at all for bullet drop. And I also measured the velocity of the bullets, again using my ideal setups with the longest barrels on both of these. And it turns out at 200 meters at least, they would consistently hit on the exact same frame, and therefore the muzzle velocity is pretty much the same for both of these. You do have to lead your targets a little bit if they're moving, because there absolutely is some travel time, but it does appear to be consistent between these two guns, at least with these ideal setups. Speaking of those ideal Warzone setups, let's have a look at them. First up, we have the Kar98 class that I use, and with this we've got the monolithic suppressor, the 27.6-inch barrel, which is the longest one, the tac laser, sniper scope, and sleight of hand. Now, I like using sleight of hand here because I find that it's really quick to just pop a round back in once you fire it, and I just find that to be really helpful. Now, it's worth noting that with this particular setup, our aim down sight time is 417 milliseconds, which is very solid. Now let's compare that to my SPR setup that I like to use in Warzone. And with this, you can see our aim down sight time is 467 milliseconds, so it still is 50 milliseconds slower than the Kar98, but it's still significantly faster than the actual sniper rifles in this game. And with this, we have the monolithic suppressor, the SPR 26-inch barrel, the tac laser, the sniper scope, and then also the fast bolt, the feather bolt. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people wondering, why am I using the default ammunition? Why am I not using 338 Lapua or 300 Norma Mag on here? And the reason for that is those ammunition types are no longer hit scan like they were when this gun first came out. And also, they fixed those attachments where when the gun first came out, they were actually improving your aim down sight time pretty noticeably, even though they were supposed to be hurting you in this area, and that was fixed a little while back as well. So they are significantly slowing down your aim down sight time. And on top of this, with the 338 Lapua, there's a little hidden downside to this that decreases your rate of fire. And this means when you now weigh the upsides and the downsides of the ammunition types versus the different barrels that you could use, like the 26-inch barrel, it turns out for what I'm looking for, that 26-inch barrel is simply better than those alternate ammunition types. So yeah, there you have it. There's my Kar98 versus my SPR setup for Warzone. They're very, very similar. And now it's time to answer the question, which one of these is better? And we're going to start with Warzone. I'll also share my little opinion on multiplayer as well. But for Warzone specifically, both of these Marksman Rifles are great, and you honestly can't go wrong using either of them. If you're looking for a little bit of a snappier aim down sight time, then I'd recommend the Kar98. However, the SPR is still quite fast in that area, and you get a bunch of other benefits for using the SPR, like that significantly faster fire rate when using the feather bolt attachment. Additionally, the sniper scope itself I definitely prefer on the SPR, and this is why I do lean a little bit more toward the SPR in Warzone. I really like that I can get that super fast follow-up shot, and that slightly slower aim down sight time than the Kar98 really isn't a big deal for me. As for multiplayer though, if you are just planning on running around quick scoping like a madman, This is where the lines start to become a little bit more blurred, because that noticeably faster aim down sight time on the Kar98, that will make much more of a difference in a multiplayer environment where you're on smaller maps and you generally have to react faster and get on target a little bit faster. But there is definitely still something to be said for the SPR with that feather bolt, which gets your follow-up shot out faster, so if you're dealing with multiple enemies, then you're better off with the SPR. So you really could go either way, and like I said, you just can't go wrong with either of these. Both of these are amazing marksman rifles, they're very easy to use, and both great guns. I just generally lean a little bit more in the direction of the SPR over the Kar98. Of course, that is just my opinion though. I'd like to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Between these two marksman rifles, which one is your favorite for either Warzone or multiplayer? Just let me know those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.